Looking for a simple gift to take to a baby shower? I'm Tova with Professor Pincushion, and today I'm going to show you how to make a Minky baby blanket. Soft and cuddly, this blanket is trimmed with satin binding for a luxurious feel. I'll be using 1 yard of Minky fabric to make mine the size of a receiving blanket, but feel free to make yours any size you want. There's no reason to buy these at an expensive baby store when it's so easy to make them yourself. Let's go ahead and get started. Here are some of the supplies we're going to be using for this project. We of course have our fabric. I'm using a Minky type fabric, but you can also make this with fleece or flannel. You need 1 yard if you're using 60-inch width fabric, which is what my fabric is. If you're doing something that's 45-inch, then you're probably going to need 2 yards of that fabric. You need 1 package of your satin blanket binding. You need some binding clips here, your fabric scissors, your sewing machine, pins and needles, your all-purpose thread, and then you'll also need your iron. I recommend cutting out from your fabric 2 pieces that are 30 by 36 inches. This is about the size of a receiving blanket, but of course you can make this blanket any size that you wish. If you have a rotary mat, cutter, and ruler, it definitely makes it a lot easier to cut out your pieces. But obviously if you just have scissors, you can use those as well. Now if you're making something out of flannel, or something else that's 100% cotton, make sure that you wash it before you cut it out because those can definitely shrink on you. Something like fleece or Minky fabric, like what I'm using, it's 100% polyester, so you don't have to worry about it shrinking. Place the 2 blanket pieces together, wrong side to wrong side, so you see the right side on the outside for both of them, and then you're going to pin all around the perimeter. Sew a basting stitch a 1/2 inch away from the edge all the way around your blanket. So we're going to keep the 2 edges sewn together, and you're using the longest stitch on your machine. Now I'm using a walking foot because with this type of fabric what tends to happen is your layers are together, and as you sew they'll start to move away from each other and become uneven. So that's why I definitely recommend using a walking foot if you have it. If you have trouble sewing this in your machine, let's say you don't have a walking foot and it's just not cooperating, you can just hand baste the edges using some all-purpose thread and your hand needle. So you would just do a large running stitch. So all I'm doing is just going up and down through both layers. So that way we're able to treat this blanket as a single entity instead of 2 separate entities, like 2 layers become 1. Open the end of your satin blanket binding. You're going to take each corner and you're going to fold it to the center crease here. So that's going to be folded like this, and then I'm going to fold it like this. Now if you're worried about the edge fraying, you could put some fabric sealant on the edge and let it dry before you do this, and that should cut down on that. But usually with the brand new package, you don't really have to worry about that end. Then I'm going to take my iron. I'm going to press it. Make sure you use a lower setting. I just have it on the polyester setting because you don't want to accidentally burn it. So after you have it pressed, then you're just going to refold it back in half, and it should look something like this. If you look at your binding, you'll notice it's not folded perfectly in half. One side will be shorter than the other side. So this top part is shorter than the back half. Look at the shorter side when you're putting it on your blanket. I'm going to unfold it, slip this edge so it ends up right on the center crease there. And I'm going to stick it on like this. Now you don't want this end to be on the corner of the blanket. You want to start in the middle of one side. I'm then using my binding clips to start attaching the binding on. And I'm not using straight pins because this is a satin binding. I want to make sure that I don't accidentally snag it or put a hole in it with the straight pins. That's why I'm using these little binding clips. Attach your binding until you get to one corner. You're going to take it to your machine and you're going to stitch diagonally right here and then along the bottom of the binding until you get to the end here, and you're going to do that with a zigzag stitch. I'm doing a zigzag stitch that's slightly bigger, just a little bit longer stitch length than what the normal setting is. And even though I'm going along the bottom of my binding, if a little bit of my stitch actually goes off the binding onto the blanket side, that's fine. You just want to make sure that it is catching the edge of your binding on the other side. We want to go in the other direction now, but we want to make sure we have a nice corner here. So I'm going to take my binding, I'm going to open it up just a little bit so I can go ahead and start putting this edge into the crease, just like we did before. You should have an edge that kind of goes diagonally here once you do that. And you're just going to take this edge and you're going to put it up. And you just want it to look as nice as possible. So once you do this edge, you're going to want to go ahead and take a look at the back to make sure that this looks as nice and neat as that one. So once you have it, you can go ahead and start sewing. Again, you don't have to worry about sewing on the corner yet. We're just going to sew here, and you're going to do the same thing once you get to the other corner. Here's a quick look at that same corner. I put in a bunch of pins because I really want to make sure it's going to not shift as I'm trying to sew it. So this is the top. And this is what it looks like on the back. When you come all the way back around, you're basically going to finish off just like you started here, where we're going to have a diagonal fold. You want to make sure this is going to overlap by a few inches, so I went ahead and trimmed off the excess. And then you're going to take the corners, you're going to fold them to the center, fold them to the center. If you want to go ahead and lightly press this, you can. It just makes it a lot easier, especially when you fold it like this, because then you're going to slip the blanket in between so it's fitting on the crease, and it's going to end up something like this. You're going to finish stitching the bottom edge until you get to the other part, but then after you finish all that, you're going to stitch over this part right here where we have this diagonal fold. Make sure your zigzag stitches is going on both sides. And you're going to do the same thing on each of the folded corners as well. I'm going to do a zigzag stitch going right over this crease. After you sew your corners, your blanket is now complete and you can give it to someone as a great gift. We hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please subscribe to get notified of our weekly releases. Also check out ProfessorPincushion.com to view our complete library with well over 350 sewing tutorials. If you would like to directly support us, you can check out our Patreon campaign and earn some exclusive perks. Thanks for watching.